Welcome everybody. Looks like we can get started. Thanks for being patient. Thank you so much for coming out to this tonight, and we hope to be able to give you a whole bunch of information, opportunity to answer some questions. Anybody who doesn't know who I am, I'm John Clark. I'm the mayor of Ridgway. Meeting purpose, format, and structure. The purpose of this meeting is strictly to provide facts and information about the RAMP project award from CDOT and to answer questions about the project. We'll not go into a lot of detail. A lot of the details are yet to be worked out, but where we can, we will. If there's stuff that ends up coming out of this that are questions we need to answer that we don't have the answers for now, we will get them and we will post them on the website. There'll be lots of follow-up. This is not a one-time deal. It's basically a general overview covering project scope, cost, and time frame. Meeting format is as follows. CDOT staff, CDOT stands for Colorado Department of Transportation. I know we get acronym crazy around governments, and that's not a good thing necessarily. CDOT will present what is RAMP, another acronym, and they will explain what RAMP stands for. And then an overview of the Highway 62 improvements, including history and scope. Then Bill Frownfelter of Russell Engineering will present an overview of the downtown improvements planned on the north side of Highway 62 in the historic business district, including history and scope. And then combined, the CDOT folks and Russell Engineering folks will jointly present the current project scope, cost, and time frame. And at the very end, we'll open up the meeting for questions from the audience. So, just want to reiterate, we are going to have a bunch of information presented. We won't be asking or giving you opportunity to ask questions during that. We'll wait for the very end, okay? So if you have questions, make sure you get a piece of paper from one of these tables, write them down so you don't forget. And then at the end, what I will do is I will ask for questions from the audience. We will have Ron over here write down the questions, and that way we'll be able to figure out if there are a bunch of essentially duplicate questions, and then we'll go through them and I'll give them to the presenters to try and answer, okay? And I'll just reiterate again, if we don't have an answer or we need to do more research, we will tell you that, and we will make sure we get the answers and get them back to you one way or the other. Again, there are feedback forms on both tables. Please feel free to give those, get yourself a copy of those and give us your feedback on the project. And now I'd like to introduce the presenters. We have Kerrie Neet with CDOT. She's the Region Transportation Director from Durango. We have Ed Archuleta, Project Manager for Colorado Department of Transportation Office in Durango. We have, of course, Jen Coates, Town Manager. And then we have Bill Frownfelter, Engineer with Russell Engineering. They are the company that engineered the construction drawings for the town's original downtown infrastructure project. So now, with that, I will introduce Ed Archuleta and Kerrie Neet to go over the RAMP project details.
Thanks for the opportunity to work on my public speaking skills. So before we get started, I just want to go over some background on my involvement and the genesis of this project. So in approximately 2005, there was a ballot initiative for referendum C and D, and I don't remember the details quite honestly.
Ed, will you pull that
A little closer? Really close.
Yeah.
Okay. So Greg Clifton was the town manager at the time, and we walked Highway 62, and we came up with the scope of a project to 3-lane 62 and improve the storm drain pretty much from Amelia at that time down to the river. And we were approached by the town to do this. The project was, I believe, at the time on the long-range plan out to 2035, I believe, but wasn't on the short-term 7-year plan. So that's why we accelerated it, I guess is a term, and it went on to the ballot initiative. And that did not pass. The voters of Colorado did not vote for that project list. So, okay, that was put away. And then in 2007 or 2008, it was put on what we call our STIP. That's our acronym, but basically it's about a 7-year plan. And it was proposed to be funded from using FY16 and FY17 dollars. So it was still out of ways. No real immediate plan to do this, and it was going to be funded with what we call RPP and faster funding. These two separate pots of funding we have, not surface treatment. And so we had a plan to do it in 2016 and 17. Well, our STIP expires in 15, and 16 and 17 are what we call illustrative years. They really weren't locked in. But we chipped away at the job. We funded some design. We had some leftover project savings. I think it was from FY12 funding, and we had some survey work done this year. You might have seen our crews out here. So we had a lot of topo survey done, some utility work done, utility locates done, but just trying to chip away at the job. And our concern was, with the town's plan to improve the side streets and tie into 62, we want to make sure all our drainage works and our profile would work. That Joanne, when she's coming in and tying into 62, that we didn't have a bust in the grade. We wanted to make sure that when the project is eventually done, from Amelia down to the river, that the profile worked and that the connections from the side streets, the town streets to 62 would work. So we're always concerned about working in conjunction with the town on the design. In 2006, so I'm backing up again, Ridgway had a downtown plan, and they approached us on what would be acceptable for 62, with a cross section for 62, and we're going to get to that. So I guess my point is we've been working with the town for quite a long time and just trying to keep this some planning effort to it, so we don't get crosswise and we don't do work that is going to be throwaway. So, like I said, the 16 and 17 STIP were called illustrative years, and they weren't really locked in. In 2012, the Transportation Commission took a different approach, and I'll let Kerrie talk this a little bit more, on project funding. We're going away from regional allocations, and it's going to go more to asset management and performance-driven funding for projects. Before I'd mentioned RPP and faster, Region 5 was given an allocation for RPP money and faster money, and it had to meet the long-range plan, and we could chip away and do those projects kind of on our own. We're moving away from that. And the reason is, to this slide, we haven't had a gas tax increase since 1993, and the gas tax has pretty much stayed the same. I gotta look at this thing. That slide right over there, if I had gas taxes since gas prices have risen. I mean, back in '93 they were $2 a gallon. Now they're well over $3. But the revenue from the gas stays the same. We don't get the tax revenue from gas sales doesn't increase with the price of gas. It's fixed at 44 cents a gallon, I believe, or 40 cents a gallon. So gas tax revenues decreased, costs of construction and everything have gone up. So the Transportation Commission realized there was no way that we were going to be able to do all the projects we had planned with the same fixed amount of funding or revenue. So that's where they took a different approach to performance management. We can talk all night about that, but we're not here to talk about that. So we're going to not a regional allocation, but statewide allocation, performance driven. And so along comes RAMP. And the 16 and 17 STIP isn't going to be honored, so to speak. The projects in 16 and 17 are going to have to compete based on the need on a statewide scale. So unfortunately, the project we had in 16 and 17 were Ridgway, and there were some other projects south of Durango that we're probably not going to get funding for because they do have to compete with the other projects statewide. So then the Transportation Commission and CDoT executives came up with basically it was our director, Don Hunt, came up with a RAMP program. And I'm going to defer to Kerrie to that. to kind of explain RAMP, but it's basically there's different sections of RAMP. This one's a RAMP partnership project, and another section is asset management. So we had to put some projects together that were performance driven. So CDOT Region 5 has a large RAMP funded project from New Mexico to Toyac, and there's also some large bridge preventive maintenance projects. And the key is preventive maintenance and asset management. And why don't I defer to Kerrie for the rest of this? She's much better at RAMP explanation than I am.
Thanks, Ed. Can everyone hear me okay? I need to put it right up to my mouth, right up to the mic, because I don't have a very loud voice. So what RAMP is, first of all, and we love acronyms, unfortunately. We speak a different language sometimes, but so what CDOT's doing is we're using our money more efficiently. And what that means is we had a cash balance before, and for example, if we had a $5 million project, we would save, and it got allocated. When Ed talks about Region 5, he's talking about Southwest Colorado. When we got an allocation or for a certain amount of money, sometimes we had to save it up over several years. And that tied up the money in the bank while we were saving it up. So what we're doing now is we're going to expenditure-based, which means we're spending down our cash balance. It's a one-time shot, and that's what RAMP is. It's really spending our cash balance and using our money more efficiently so that we get it out the door, get it on the roads, get the roads fixed. So the RAMP acronym is really responsible. What it stands for is Responsible Acceleration of Maintenance and Partnerships. As Ed was saying, there's kind of two pieces to it. One is we gotta, if we put more money out on the road, our infrastructure is old, it's failing, we need to fix it first. We need to take care of our bridges and our roads. So a good portion of it is that part, fix it first. The other part of it is partnerships. We have a lot of local partners, and the idea is that how can we partner with local communities so that we build projects that what they want and help address the needs of the system statewide. So for the partnership piece of it, and this ties back to Ridgway, we had 166 applications statewide requesting $1.54 billion. And part of that required a match, a 20% targeted match, and the commission looked at all these projects. CDOT helped out review these applications, Ed helped review these applications, others did. And of those 166 projects, only 44 were awarded money, and Ridgway was one of them. The commission, who is our policy group that directs our funding and directs where our money goes, that's appointed by the governor, put Ridgway on that list of projects. And that was, the entire list statewide was $646 million, but that's less than half of what was requested. So Ridgway is one of the lucky ones to even get on this list. One of the other criteria is that the projects be completed by the end of 2017. So this is a one-time only shot of money to spend down our cash balance, get money out on the road, work with our partners, and it's a 5-year program, that's it. And most of the rest of our money is just going to take care of what we have.
So Region 5, southwest corner of our region, we had 7 partnership projects. We have 7 partnership projects that were approved by the Transportation Commission, and they totaled to be $23.6 million. This project, Ridgway, the project amount is 13.7. The RAMP request was 10.5. So this project is the largest in Region 5 by far, almost half of the total amount allocated to Region 5, and the largest one for this region. In fact, that surface treatment project down by New Mexico to Toyac we were fortunate too and aggressive, and that's the largest surface treatment project in the state as well. So we're doing, Region 5 is doing pretty well for our size and for our remoteness as far as ramp's concerned, I believe. Just really quickly, of the 7 other projects that we have a small $1.6 million project just outside of Cortez. We have this one at 13.7. We have the Skyrocket. There's a box culvert just outside of Uray. That's $2 million. The town's paying 20% of that. We have a signalization project, a small $1.8 million job in Ignacio. The town of Durango, City of Durango, is making a connection to a 160 for 6.4. So that's the second one, which is 1/2 of Ridgway's project. Antonio reconstruction. The town's getting a storm drain installed in connection with the surface treatment project. That's a $2.7 million job. And the town of Buena Vista has a project similar to this project. That's their portion is $2.4 million, and we're coupling that with a surface treatment project. So in scope, it's very similar to this job, and it'll be about the same, a little smaller, probably $1 to $2 million smaller than this project, but the same scale. This cross section is the section that the town came to us. It was, Jen was the town manager, or just began being the town manager, I believe, and approached CDOT for this cross section that would be acceptable for 62. And this is what we agreed with the town. There's a 3-lane section. So starting from, let's start from 550. Let's start from Amelia. So from Amelia to Laura, and Joanne's probably have to help me here, correct me. We're sticking with a 2-lane section. Originally, when we scoped it, we wanted a 3-lane section. The town wanted a 3-lane section all the way to Amelia. We've trimmed that back, so it's a 2-lane to Laura. Then it transitions to a 3-lane at Laura. There's a transition there. And then this section comes in. So there's a center turn lane, 2 through lanes, a bike lane, and sidewalk and curb and gutter from Laura to the park, essentially. Where is Joanne?
Over here.
Basically to the bridge.
To the bridge. The bridge was designed, was laid out for this section, so we built that bridge to match this section. Once we get past the bridge, we tie into the existing sidewalks and we fix the drainage up to the intersection. When we originally scoped the job back when Greg Clifton was here, we were looking at a big storm drain trunk line to carry all the storm drain down to the river. Since that time, we've looking at a different way to approach this project. We're taking a lot of the surface drainage onto Laura and Cora, is that correct, Joanne?
Mary and Cora.
Okay, then taking it north. So reduce some of the costs that we originally looked at. And pretty much that's it. We get a sidewalk and parking and a center turn lane, and that's the section that we were approached with from the town, and that's where we're at. As far as the enhancement section, we'll let Bill talk to that. Let me check my notes. So bike lane, storm drain, landscaping, and lighting. We'll take it all the way to 550. And I'll give it to Bill.
Hi everyone, Bill Frownfelter with Russell Planning and Engineering. We've been involved in the streetscape project downtown pretty much since original conceptual planning in a minor role at one point, and then involved with doing basically the preliminary design drawings for it. Give you a little background on the whole thing for anybody who's not familiar with it. In 2005, the Ridgway community voted in a capital improvement tax to be used for capital projects, including downtown improvements. 2006, a plan was developed by a citizen committee, which included business owners, residents, other people, minor role from consultants, basically moderating that process. Came up with a conceptual plan that's shown here on the slide. In 2008, we completed preliminary design drawings, which are very close to final drawings for construction of those improvements, which are shown up here. 2009, everything got backburnered because the economy tanked and everybody kind of withdrew a lot of their ideas on projects. But in 2011, again, the project was discussed through countywide conversations on economic development, the Array County bottom-up economic development plan. And then 2012, a citizen committee was formed to do outreach on the project. All of that ended up leading to the RAMP application, which combined the two projects for the community with a smaller match, getting the project done for Ridgway in that. Basically, the project, the downtown project involved Laura up to Clinton, Cora, and then Lena all the way up to Charles, and then also doing Clinton. It involves paving, sidewalk improvements, drainage improvements, and some landscaping. Also included is relocation of Railroad Street, lining it up with the intersection that crosses on the south side. This involves relocating the tennis courts, putting a parking lot in there adjacent to it. Whoops. What did I do? Thanks. Too many buttons on this thing. So it involved this. It involved also paving with no sidewalk, curb and gutter, but paving Railroad Street from the relocation all the way up to Otto. So basically 2 long blocks, the equivalent of 4 blocks in town. I guess, let's see. Again, involves sidewalks, streetlights, landscaping, and irrigation. We didn't include signage and wayfaring, and we didn't include the parking lots north of the library, which originally there was discussion about improving those to a better surface, and that was taken out of the project. With that, I'll hand it over.
You flip it so I don't do what you did. So the scope of the job for 62 is, I will take the point. Oh, okay. So Amelia, is that right?
Yes.
So sidewalk on one side down to Laura, and then the 3-lane section, like I explained earlier, across the bridge and down to 550. The risk on this job, quite honestly, as we were talking earlier, if there weren't any utilities involved, it'd be pretty simple to build this project. I mean, there's not much to it. The risks involved are utilities. There's water line, there's storm sewer. I don't know what kind of other electrical or telephone lines are below there, but we need to adjust the profile. So then you're going to reconstruct a section of the structural section of the highway, and we haven't located all the utilities. So finding those utilities, figuring out how deep they are relative to what our new roadway excavation is going to be required, that's a risk and somewhat of an unknown at this time. We're not far enough along to really identify that. Another risk for the cost is construction phasing. Whenever you do a project and you got to get traffic around, you got to put temporary paving in. Temporary means taking it out, so basically you're paying for something temporary. It adds the cost up. So those are really the 2 risk items on this project as far as Highway 62 is concerned, quite honestly, is just utilities when it comes to roadway profile, utilities when it conflicts when it comes to storm drain, and construction phasing and duration of construction. The rest of it, not so much. I mean, it's always difficult, but those are pretty much knowns. We know what our width is. We have 60 foot or 60 or 66. 66. And then we widen out to 100 when we go a little bit farther east. So there's not much to that. Well, there's more to it, but always more to it. But utilities and construction phasing are the two things. Opportunities, one-time funding, like Kerrie said. You want to talk about the Transportation Commission language? Oh, and timeline. So timeline is this, and I'll give it to Kerrie. CDOT is responsible for agreeing with the town, generating a cost estimate and a schedule that the town can commit to. The town needs to sign a letter of commitment by January 6th and send it to the Transportation Commission. And after that, there has to be an IGA, which is basically a contract, intergovernmental agreement between the town and CDOT, and that has to be executed by June 30th. So with the letter of commitment and with the town, it's the bonding, which Jan can talk to. The design can start in earnest on the project. But like I mentioned, we're already somewhat ahead on this. We've committed and we've got some survey completed on this. And so we've gained some time on the timeline, quite honestly, for design process. It's not going to be like we're going to sit with our hands folded until the IGA is executed.
So, everyone hear me again? So one really key issue is getting that commitment from the town. I mean, as you saw earlier in the slides, there's been a lot, it's a very competitive grant process, and there's a lot of applicants out there that didn't get funded that are saying, well, what if one of these local agencies doesn't commit the money? And, you know, can we be next in line to get it? So that's, you know, one of the reasons we're here tonight is to answer questions. And, you know, that the whole issue, I think that'll be answered by the town if you have questions on that, which you probably will, as far as how that funding is going to be set up. But that 20% targeted match is really key, and a letter of commitment from the town to the commission is really key by January 6th. Otherwise, that funding will probably go to someone else. So that's a key part of the process. Jen will talk about the 20% match, I guess.
Sorry. There's no slide for that, so carry on. But as Kerrie and Ed mentioned, can you hear me? As Kerrie and Ed mentioned, okay, thanks. The part of the project application that went in for this ramp project said the town would commit $2 million to the overall project. So Ed referenced earlier, CDOT putting in $10.5 million, and the town has committed to $2 million. Just a couple of weeks ago, or last week, the council directed us to also put in an application to the Department of Local Affairs for a $500,000 grant award through their Energy Impact Fund. And that would then take the town's financial liability down to $1.5 million. We won't hear about that project award though until probably just before the April 1st election. So the direction here would be set by January 6th, entering into this letter of commitment with CDOT for the project. By the January council meeting, the town council would have to issue the ballot language for any April 1st election. And that would look somewhere up to a maximum of $2 million that the town would commit through some mechanism. And I think those conversations can happen over the coming weeks with the council. And then once, if things are headed in that direction and or a successful ballot issue, then we would enter into an intergovernmental agreement with CDOT in the summer of 2014. So basically, through the application, the town's committed $2 million. There's probably some opportunities that we can work with to try to figure out how to decrease that cash liability. But that is what the town would need to bring to the table through whatever partnerships and arrangements or funding mechanisms that are available.
Want to mention the in-kind as well?
Yes, thanks. So, and part of the application, so the total application was over $13 million, as Ed referenced, 13.7. About $800,000 of that is in kind from the town through a number of mechanisms. Some of it is staff time, labor benefits, that sort of thing that we can count toward that match. Some of it is, as Ed mentioned, decreasing the overall cost of the drainage. So by the town and CDOT partnering on the project, we're able to get some economy of scale and get some creative solutions as a partnership project that we otherwise would be working on our own to do. The town's total project is still the $3.5 million downtown streetscape project. So that's the estimates that Russell Engineering came up with back in 2008 and then recently updated as the Citizen Committee did the outreach over the last year on the project. So it's still a $3.5 million project. The town is on the hook for $2 million, and as part of our RAMP application, we put in $800,000 in-kind match. So some accrued, some yet to be accrued. Obviously, there's going to be work involved in that sort of thing to make it happen. And that's on top of the $2 million commitment. So the town is actually coming to the table now with $2.8 million, but the $2 million is the cash commitment in the application. Anything else you'd like to mention?
So, are we ready for questions now? Sorry, can't get in front of that speaker. Ron, you want to come up and help us? Thanks. So a couple things I want to just throw out. I just want to make sure, I know there's been a lot of discussion. I've been going around town and trying to engage business owners and citizens and make sure everybody has plenty of opportunity to have my ear, and I've encouraged the council to do the same thing. Hopefully a lot of you have talked to one or more of us. There obviously are a lot of questions, a lot of issues. I want to stress that even though the presentation so far might have sort of sounded like, here's what we're doing, it's not decided yet. It's obviously something that we're debating, and we want to have as much information and then of course as much citizen input and feedback in order to make the decision whether or not to move forward. But it's not definite, so I want to make sure that's obvious. And then what I'd like to do is just start getting questions. Paula, you put up your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand. If they want to know this by January 6th, why are we waiting until April to have a ballot question?
Because April is our regular election, and that would be just, it's okay to do that. That's when we have our regular town council election
And if
every
they
year.
want to know by January 6th, how did people get to have an opinion?
Well, there's 2 months between now and then for input and feedback and a couple council meetings. And
then council can vote on the expenditure without the people who have.
Council's going to vote whether or not to put it on the ballot. And then if it doesn't pass, it doesn't happen. So
we're making a temporary commitment on January 6th?
we're making a commitment to ask the electorate to approve the bond, and if the bond doesn't pass, it doesn't happen.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
The CDOT's okay with us saying we think we want to do it, but we have to have our ballot.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then if we say no, then all that money will go to other people.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And if we, if in the next couple of months, the council feels like the consensus is to not even proceed with the ballot question, then at that point, we tell CDOT, sorry, we're not gonna move forward, and they would certainly have plenty of people lining up to ask for that money instead. Okay?
Yeah, thanks for answering.
Okay. All right, so Andy.
I have a question, John. You talked about a $2 million bond question to the voters. What are the other potential revenue sources available to the town to fund this project? Specifically, let me throw a couple out there that maybe we can talk about too. Because I think one of the objections we all heard from property owners was that the property tax per commercial property owner was so high. And so how much of the pre-existing, pre-approved sales tax is the town able to pledge towards this specific fund, the one that Frowny mentioned in 2005, we as voters approved that. How much of that revenue is actually being pledged to pay for this? Number one, and two, I know being a property owner in River Park, there's actually a language in our covenants and in our property records that we're subject to a potential improvement district, special improvement district for the improvement of Railroad Street, or contributing towards some percentage of that. Is that something that the town's looked at and exploring in terms of reducing the burden on the commercial landowners?
That's a good question. Ron's got the question about other possible funding sources. Honestly, I don't think we've had any discussion about the potential for a River Park improvements district that could go towards this as well. So that should be one of our questions. And I'm guessing that's one that we probably can't answer tonight, but it's a very good question to have on our list. And I'm gonna, even though I already sort of answered Paula's question, I think it was important that everybody understood that right off the bat. From now on, I'm just gonna make sure we get the questions down and then we'll answer them once we get them all. So, next, who else has a question?
Well,
Rod.
do you have any answer to Andy's question about what's happening with the sales tax that we approved in 2006?
Well,
So
what
how much of that is committed to this?
What I'd like to do is
Questions, please.
what I'd like to do is get all the questions down and then systematically answer them. And I will repeat them once we get to the point where we're ready to start trying to get our panel of experts to try and answer them, okay? So let's just get questions down for now. Rodney, you have another question?
This one, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay, so what sort of mechanism does the town contemplate presently for repaying the bond?
Okay.
Where is the money gonna come from? What is, how does the town conceive of it right now? Do we have an idea, or are we just looking for ideas?
Well, if I understand your question, it's going to be a property tax bond.
We're not looking at any other,
We're looking at other things to partially offset that by, but that would be the majority of it, a property tax bond.
okay, my corollary question to that.
Go ahead.
Do we know how much that will be? How
Oh,
much-
so you're saying, do we know how much that will be per 100,000 value or something? We can get you some answers like that. I should have been using this since the start. I'll hand out the microphone as we have questions.
It sounds,
How much would the actual bond increase taxes, say, per 100,000? Right?
Right.
Okay.
it sounds like you'll be in a similar situation as you were the last time you were discussing the streetscape bond, where you don't know for sure whether you'll be getting the grant, so you're gonna have to ask for more. You'll be asking for 2 million instead of 1.5 million that you would actually need to spend if you get the grant. Is that
Well, so
accurate?
Samantha's question would be, Ron, will we ask for 2 million, or will we ask for 1.5 with basically hope, but how to put this? Would we make the bond issue 1.5 million and say that if we don't get the DOLA grant, we don't move forward? That's an option as well. So that would be are we asking for 1.5, are we asking for 2, or are we asking for something even less than 1.5 with some other possible tax commitments on the town's part?
The ballot language is due way before you'll know about the,
True, we won't know about
or the grant.
the grant from DOLA, until, as Jen said, probably within weeks before the April election. But I do think that we could structure the bond question, the ballot question for the bond issue, to be a lower number than we would be able to have out of pocket or through a straight property tax bond, and just have it understood that if that bond issue passes, but that we don't get the DOLA grant, or the DOLA grant's the main one. If we don't get that, then it doesn't happen. Okay? Next.
I have a couple of questions. As I understand it, originally CDOT's project was just 62, and that now under RAMP, CDOT is actually incorporating in its project the Clinton and downtown area, correct? So all that will now be included in RAMP, rather than as a separate town project adjoining the CDOT project. It's one project for the whole thing, right?
Correct.
And the other question is, I heard Jen say that this was the original 3.5 million streetscape, but our portion of it is now significantly reduced. But I noticed that Laura and the third block of Clinton have been removed, so I'm a little confused about that. Originally, streetscape had it going all the way to Laura and down.
It still goes to Laura.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this,
Oh, you're right, it's just
Yeah.
my confusion. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
nothing's been cut out.
I can just
Okay,
talk.
speak up.
So, this is so you're probably not gonna do the whole thing at once. So when you close a street, how long does it take before that street's open again?
I'll call that a phasing question. How are we gonna phase this, right?
Well, how long, if you close Clinton down, how long is Clinton closed?
Well, so the reason I'd like to just pose it as a question about, I mean, Ron's putting it as you put it. I think we need to ask CDOT about phasing, and we've already had some preliminary discussions, and I'd like them to give you their take. I think, real quickly, I think some ideas are that you don't necessarily have to fully close any street. You can keep one lane open in some areas, or in every area through the project, depending on how you phase it. So wouldn't necessarily close whole streets at a time. But phasing is a huge question, and I'd like to give them a chance to answer phasing questions as we get to more questions.
If there aren't detours, where would they end up? Like if the road is closed?
Good question. So, and that is the same. It's a variation on the phasing question. How is phasing going to work? How are we going to structure our detouring during the construction process? Right.
Is the drainage surface drainage, or is it gonna be going into the sewer all along the highway?
It's going to be storm drainage, but sorry, we should put question about drainage and let the engineers answer that question. How is drainage going to be structured? Don?
Another question on drainage is the drainage to the north. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Okay, so a extension of that question is where will the drainage go that is now all surface? Does that sound right? Tom, go ahead. Can you speak? Can you yell out?
I will try to speak clearly and loudly. Since the 2005 capital improvements tax, right after that, we did South Lena, I believe, with some or part of that money. Since that time, how much money does the town have in that envelope?
Okay, so the question is, tell me if this makes sense to you. The question is, the 0.5% sales tax that was passed a number of years ago for downtown capital improvements, how much is in that pot right now, and how much does it generate per year? I think those are both good questions.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to take the other corollary that John is how much have we already spent on this project in preparation as well.
Okay. So an extension of that question is how much of that pot of sales tax money has already gone towards engineering and the process of getting to where we are today with the downtown infrastructure project.
This is just a question addressing something this gentleman said, but you were talking about the risks as far as utilities and temporary paving, duration, storm lines for continuing everything down to Amelia. If it ends up costing more than what you had probably planned, where does that money come from? Does it come out of RAMP? Does it come from CDOT? Does it come from the town?
Okay, so if I can try and restate that, is your question, generally in a big picture, what happens if there are cost overruns?
Yes. I just didn't know how to say that.
Okay, does that make sense? A number of questions? Well, we're all right, we haven't even been here an hour yet, so. Somebody got a TV show they need to go see? Jim?
What's the alternative plan, because it looks like with the 66 feet on 62, there's no parking on the main street. What's the kind of parking plan behind all this that's been kind of cooked up?
Okay, so that question would be, how are we addressing the loss of parking that would happen through the 3-laning on 62? Anybody else? Torben?
Yeah, the ice cream parlor was being worried about the kids crossing the park to go get ice cream. Is there a plan for good pedestrian crossing across the
Okay, so the question is, how are we addressing highway crossing, pedestrian crossing? Good question.
It's not that much paving, but with the paving, is there a long-term maintenance cost difference between the dirt roads and the paved roads?
Good question. We've looked at that. So the question is, what's the difference in long-term maintenance cost between paving and dirt streets? Samantha?
Will paving, the street around the park protect the trees from the application of
Mag chloride? So the question might be restated to, how does paving benefit the town through not having to apply mag chloride anymore? You got that, Ron?
The environmental benefit,
Sure. Yeah, I think mag chloride versus paving is really the main question, I think, there. Next?
Well, in that question, John, would you mind throwing in whether or not the town has actually studied the impact of the particulate matter generated by the dust of the roads and the health consequences of having dirt streets with heavy load traffic?
Good question. So that gets maybe,
combine that with.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's the same.
Ron's original restatement is probably better for that. You know, what are the environmental consequences / benefits of paving? Yeah, I mean, there are obviously issues when you don't mag chloride and leave the streets dirt with particulate, PM10 they call it, the small particulate dust that is generated from dirt streets. Rodney, you want that mic, or do you care?
Yeah, I have a question maybe for CDOT. If town does not pass this bond, doesn't float this bond measure, or it doesn't pass, and I assume the ramp funding for this project goes away, but what is CDOT's long-term objective for Highway 62 through Ridgway? Is that going to be 3-laned eventually anyway?
So I might restate that to be, if we don't put this question on the ballot, or the ballot question fails, does CDOT imagine doing 3-laning of 62 anyway at some point?
Exactly.
Did you have a question? No? Anyone else? We getting there? Jim?
I'm just trying to understand, so in area, or was it Region 5, basically Ridgway's gonna get like half the funding of the entire region.
Of the ramp?
Of ramp.
Right.
I know we're a great town, but I'm sure that's not the reasoning behind it. I'm just kind of wondering, why is this a necessity that CDOT sees that we need to have? Is it traffic flow? What's the reason? Is it because we're a great partner in Ridgway? I'm just trying to understand why.
So let me restate that maybe to ask the CDOT folks what their thinking might be about why we were awarded the ramp monies, what their reasoning was. Yeah. Anybody else? Sounds like we're getting there. We got a good number of questions.
Just like 20 questions.
Just another hand. Jillian? Special assessment district versus property tax bond. That's a good question. I'm not sure we can answer that without the financial experts here, but we'll get the answer to that. But we'll raise it with our panel of experts and see if anybody has a take on that. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, one more. Paula? Keep seeing hands go.
Is there any way to have this county-wide? Have this pavilion come from the whole county? Like if Ray was gonna do something, they could ask for something countywide. If they could we do something more countywide? Because those are our two towns in our whole county.
Yeah, I guess it goes with the last question a little bit. Are there other ways? I mean, I actually have had people suggest to me who live up on Log Hill that consider Ridgway their community, that they would like to figure out a way for us to generate some funding from them. It'd be complicated, but we can talk about it. Ma'am?
Right, so I was just wondering if something like that myself, because I consider Ridgway kind of my home, commercial based, living down here, but I don't live in town. How about a combination of a bond issue and then some other mechanisms for those of us who are in the outlying area and wouldn't be impacted by a town bond, like, I don't know, sales tax, because I'm simple.
Is there a creative way
to get us in on it?
To generate some funding from the greater Ridgway region? It's a good question. I think it's a complicated answer. Go ahead.
So basically the state of Colorado is putting in a lot of money, and the town is putting in a small amount. How does that affect the title to the property of those paved streets?
I think I can answer that one real quickly. The CDOT owns their right of way. We own our right of way. Nothing changes in this project. It's a partnership project to get some major infrastructure improvements done, and it wouldn't change title to any property. That's an easy one.
I do have another question. If it sounds like when you guys applied for the RAMP funding, you had to provide a specific plan with respect to the improvements that are being proposed to get to the top dollar number so that CDOT can fund a percentage. Is there any ability at this point for the town to scale back some of those structural improvements to reduce the town's share and leave CDOT's share up with a okay, or do they come down proportionally?
They come down proportionally. It's an 80-20 match. If our 20%, which is that, again, it's the total of $2 million cash and 0.8 million in kind. If we reduce that somehow through our negotiation, the whole project is reduced, and their 80% is reduced proportionally to whatever we reduce. And I'm not even sure it's an option, because they've approved a number that is the high number, and we match the 20% of that through a combination.
Right. So I think that's an important.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Because if we can't modify, and we're kind of looking at a set cost if we're going to get the 80%.
I think that's true. Any more questions?
Just a quick question. I heard something at one point about being completed by 2017. Is that what you said? So are we to assume that this project would conceivably take until 2017 to finish? I mean, is that part of the phasing?
With there was a little bit in the presentation of discussion of timing. We probably didn't get into the details, but we basically, the RAMP award comes with a stipulation that it must be done by the end of calendar year 17. But there's a lot of work to be done just to design it. Essentially, the CDOT portion of it, the Highway 62 portion, isn't really designed. We have a profile that you've seen the drawing of, but the actual, they've surveyed, but they haven't actually done the full engineering drawings. Our portion is pretty close to final, as you heard Frowny say. So, what we've talked about, I should let these guys answer this question. The question is, what is the timing on how the project will proceed? So, sorry to start into that. We ready to get into answers? Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay, the question number one, why April ballot if CDOT needs word by January 6th? I think we pretty much answered that. Does anybody still not understand? It's a little odd. It's kind of similar to the conundrum we were in with the November ballot question, but I think that you know, essentially we can't put it on the ballot until April, but we can commit in writing to having the ballot question, and if the ballot question doesn't pass, then the project doesn't pass. Do you guys have a take on that? Okay, Kerrie.
So just to let you know, the commission, Transportation Commission, when they did the resolution about the project list, specifically made language that would allow Ridgway to do a ballot initiative if there was a commitment by January 6th to do that. So they actually, in their resolution, made specific language that opens up that possibility for Ridgway and talked about Ridgway specifically.
Great, thanks. Why don't you hang on to that? Just because I think number 2 is a good one for you guys too. If either we decide to not put it on the ballot by having discussions between now and January, and the feeling is that it's just something we can't do, or if we put it on the ballot and it fails, the money just goes back into your pot and needs to be reallocated to other projects, correct?
I'll take that one. Yeah, so we have gotten calls, and it was a very competitive process. What CDOT's doing right now is there was a long application process, a phase 1 and a phase 2 through the summer to select these projects. And in January, we'll have a better idea of what money is available that may go to other projects. Now that would be the first part of this one. If the commitment is made by the council and the town to move forward with a ballot measure, then that would meet that commitment for the commission by January 6th. And then, of course, the other piece of it is the ballot measure itself. Ballot doesn't pass, the money will go back to CDOT for other projects.
Okay. I think this question number 3 is probably one of the biggest ones that offers a lot of room for discussion. What are the other possible town financial resources? I'll just start out by saying, and I'll let Jen address some of this if need be. Some of it may have to be addressed with more input from the financial experts, the bond attorneys and things. But you know, I think my take would be to commit to a ballot question that was asking for 1.5. In other words, make that gamble that we're going to get the DOLA grant for $500,000. And not ask for 2, ask for 1.5 in the bond question. Show the town that we are willing to take some chances on asking for less money from the voters and the property tax payers, because we think we have a pretty good shot at that. Of course, it's, you know, a little bit of a crapshoot, but they've given us positive feedback. They think it's a good application. The other question I think Andy got at was other tax input. Could we give a portion of that 0.5% tax for, and I think I need to roll in, one of these other questions was how much of that sales tax money still exists, how much have we been spending already? Jen could probably answer that a little better than I can, but I can say right off the bat that I think it generates about $100,000 a year as of now based on the sales tax that we're generating. Our sales tax is up, I think, 15 to 17% this year over last year, something like that. So that 0.5% raised about $100,000 this year. I think council should look long and hard at committing upfront to contributing some portion of that. I've been asked if we'd be willing to commit 50% of that yearly. I think that's a tough one because that money goes to a lot of different things. That money, I can tell you, Jen can probably fill in the gaps, but that money has already not only done the engineering on our existing project, but it's the in-kind money that has gotten all these sidewalks built recently that you've seen around town with the crosswalks and, you know, all the, that's CDOT enhancement grant projects that basically they pay for the lion's share of it. We pay I don't know if it's 20% match that gets us all those great sidewalks we've gotten in the last 5 to 10 years. The sales tax money has gone towards that. Jen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I do. So I think there's a whole lot of questions here. And kind of, I think going back to Andy's question was second and somewhat related to Alex's question and Jillian's question about special districts, special assessments, involving the county, growing that. And I think there are certainly different financing options and mechanisms that could be used. And over the last year and a half, the committee's explored some of that. The council's talked about some of that. It's embedded in the 2006 streetscape plan. Things like an urban renewal authority, a tax increment financing district, a special district, a local district, et cetera, et cetera. There's certain challenges and pros and cons certainly with all of the different financing mechanisms. A sales tax increase as well is potentially another option. The challenge with the district is if we look at a district, primarily when you set those up, it would focus on the downtown area. And there's certainly a recognition and reality that a lot of our businesses downtown are already challenged and struggling. And so to then put the entire onus of the full payment on just a handful of businesses and not distribute it throughout the town is really even, I think, more financially not realistic or possible for the town. So that sort of begs the question, or those businesses in particular, with the residents coming to the table with the property tax and distributing that tax across the whole community entirely, it actually looks like the residents bring about half of the total cost of the project, and the businesses properties actually pay about half of the total cost of the project. So it's a little more distributed, even though that assessment rate is not equal. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm happy to talk about it with anybody, or maybe we should even publish something that clarifies that too for the community. So if we were to then go to kind of Alex's comments, and we heard this throughout the course of the year too with the committee and the outreach, let's include the county. So just make a special district that includes either the school district or just Eagle Hill and Dallas Meadows and Elk Meadows and or Dallas Creek, and then maybe just include the whole county and have everybody pay. Well, that just really makes a really big conversation. It makes our small conversation in Ridgway a whole lot bigger and a whole lot more complicated. Could it be done? Probably in a decent amount of time, a whole lot of outreach, a lot of communication effort, a lot of feedback. Technically, I don't know. I don't think we have sufficient feedback from members or residents or property owners in the county to be able to answer that. Can that be done in time for this project? The answer is clearly no. We don't have the time now to set up a district. That would take an election in and of itself, and a lot of research and input on boundaries and a whole lot of work. Not to say it can't be done. It could be done if the community wants to go in that direction and thinks it's a feasible and reasonable thing to do, but it can't be done with the RAMP project award because, as you heard tonight, timing is here. And so a district just isn't an option. We could set up like a donation box at Town Hall.
I was going to say we could have bake sales.
We could charge you extra on sales tax if you live in the county and you come to town. No, but I mean, we wouldn't do that. Nobody would, council would do that. So then I think, so hopefully that answers the district question. We did over the last 15 months, 16 months hear from the community, we don't really want you to raise our sales tax. We have challenges with leakage. We have challenges here already as businesses. We have a competitive 8.6% total sales tax when we include state, county, and town at 3.6. If you increase that, that's really gonna probably not help us businesses with our costs and how we are able, certainly it would capture a different audience, tourists and people coming to town would then participate in the total cost. But I think the committee heard pretty clearly, don't mess with our sales taxes. They're already, real competitive, and we don't want to see that go any higher. So I think, the feedback generally was, property tax could be palatable at a lesser rate and offset that with some of the town's sales tax revenue. So that takes us to the capital improvements. You can cut me off.
No, go ahead.
You're the mayor. So that takes me to the capital improvements question, which is, would the town council consider contributing some of that 0.6 0.6% revenue that comes in annually to offset the total $2 million, or with the DOLA grant if it comes at 1.5. Certainly the council can talk about that. The council has heard that. I think they've heard the conversation over the past year about looking at those sales tax revenues. As Mayor Clark mentioned, it does bring in about a little over $100,000 a year now. That dipped down to about $70,000, I think, when kind of the economy went south. But there are a lot of competing priorities that the council is going to want and need to consider that those tax revenues would finance. But certainly in the coming weeks, I think that will be one of the questions that the council is going to take a look at is, you know, what is a reasonable amount that's fiscally responsible that we feel should be honored and contributed to offset the total cost of the project. So I think those conversations are yet to come. They're not really, it's not a conversation where you can say, oh, you know what, this is just throw half at it or throw it all at the project. You really need to sit down as a community, or we really need to sit down as a community and say, what are the other things that we want to see happen? How do those things get financed? What are the costs of those things? And what's a reasonable, fiscally responsible amount that can go toward this single project alone? Yeah.
Wasn't the downtown improvement project the impetus behind that 25% sales tax increase in 2005?
I wasn't here in 2005, so maybe Mayor Clark or somebody's better to represent that.
It is true, and I would argue that that's what we've been doing with it, and that there are other aspects of capital improvements that involve the downtown that I think we should, you know, I mean, we could break out our capital improvements plan and start looking at the nuts and bolts of that right now, but I don't think that would be really appropriate. You know, I just don't think we can commit to the whole thing, but we can certainly commit to a portion of it. I think that would make good sense, and I think it would be appropriate. We have been discussing that. Rick, I see Rick nodding because he's been probably the biggest proponent of that all along.
So that kind of comes along a little bit too, I think, with Councilor Johnson's question or comment about what has been expended and what's that look like. So some of those capital improvement funds, and we publish those, they're with the budget, and we're certainly, you know, I think we have put that out to the community and exactly how those funds have been expended since 2006. It includes things like developing the plan, hiring the outside consultant to come in, doing the engineered construction drawings. We have used it on a number of projects, some signage, you know, a variety of infrastructure investments. And I think the vast majority of which have been focused in the historic business district or downtown. So we are, and don't quote me on this, Samantha, I'll get you the numbers tomorrow, but I didn't bring the numbers with me, but I think at the end of this fiscal year and at the end of the next fiscal year in 2014, that capital improvements balance is going to be in the neighborhood of about $300,000. So I think it's about 280 or so, but again, don't quote me on that. We're still crunching the numbers for the budget, but that's what I remember the last one was.
Eric, you had a question? Good point. Yep. Exactly. Why not? I think you're absolutely right. We should do it because there's no reason why not to. Absolutely. All over town. I like the idea of a Kickstarter campaign with. Well, we'd want to do both, and you know, it wouldn't just disappear. I mean, I think if we put donation boxes around town, we'd earmark that money that it would be going towards the financing of this project if that's what we are talking about doing. I mean, it's creative. I think it's worth trying.
We're in a creative district.
Exactly.
Set it up on the website.
So I guess people feel like that group of answers addressed all the various financial questions. The one that I see we didn't really get to yet, number 6, is about how much would, well, I think we have numbers on how much a $2 million bond question would raise residential property taxes per 100,000 and per 300,000, and how much it would raise business property taxes for those same numbers. Do you have those in your head?
So I do, but they're also in my pocket, so I'm gonna look at my pocket after I say it out loud. There's, for residential, for $2 million, the property tax for residential property on valued at $100,000 would be about $47 a year, or $4 a month. Then you just multiply that by 3. So if the assessed value is $300,000,
about 150, about.
Yeah, it's about 100. So then on commercial property, I believe it's $147 per month per 100, or per year.
No, per year per 100,000.
Per $100,000.
And
For how long?
800 and some.
It would be a 20-year bond.
So your numbers are, for $100,000 for commercial would be $172 a year, or $15 a month. For $500,000, it'd be $860 a year, or $72 a month. That would be the commercial tax.
Right. And if you guys don't know, the state of Colorado, because of an old state initiative called the Gallagher Amendment, business property tax payers pay something like 4 times what residents pay. And it came about during the build up to what everyone thought was going to be the oil shale boom, and then that never happened. And of course, the idea of overturning the Gallagher Amendment will never happen because it would take a vote of the residents to do that. And nobody's ever going to vote to increase their property taxes by that kind of number. Bill?
Just to clarify, those rates, is that including interest?
It is. That's an interest rate of 5.5%, and it's one of the challenges with the project. As Ed and Kerrie mentioned, we probably wouldn't sell those bonds for a little bit of time, and so we have to anticipate what that interest rate would be into the future. And hedging that, we put it. Council will consider this with their investment banker, and in the coming weeks, as they hear back from the community and consider all aspects of the project. But at this time, that includes a 5.5% interest rate, which is high. It's higher than it is today, but not knowing what's going to happen.
We're trying to be realistic and conservative, yeah. And to that point, I think one of the things that got us in trouble with the November ballot question was that when it came time to write the actual ballot language, Tabor required us to put in there the actual total amount of the bond payment at the end, including all debt service, and it was something like 4.6 million. Based on the 2.7 million we were asking for then, and that 4+ million number scared a lot of people. So we need to get out right now that the 2 million number over the life of the loan, including debt service, is 3.4. But again, that number, I don't think we're going to need to ask for 2. I think we should ask for 1.5 tops. And
John, I really would like council to consider asking for a lot less and funding it out of the sales tax. Rodney's point is exactly my point. When I remember actually not only voting for it, but campaigning for it, and talking to my neighbors for it, that sales tax improvement really was all about paving downtown and making sidewalks. And if the town's been using it to fund other capital improvement projects, that's great. But the fact is we were focused on the downtown core, and that's where the far majority of that money should be spent. And if you do that, if you pledge $100,000 or $80,000 or $70,000 a year of that towards your bond repayment, you then reduce substantially the burden on the commercial property owners and the residential property owners. And it's really important that you guys do that math and you share that math with everybody in town and relate those facts to people so that they understand that, hey, we are getting the sales tax, we are reducing the repayment obligation through that. We're pledging those sales tax revenues. The town will have to pledge that towards the repayment of the bond. It's a really simple thing to do. It can bring down the cost, the new burden of the cost of this project. And really what we need to do as a town is act smartly. Because I think, you know, I may not have agreed with the property owners who were so upset with you guys and showed up and screamed and yelled, but I think we need to pay attention, and we need to be smart in how we do this project.
Thank you. Those are good comments. I think council needs to do the difficult work of looking at just exactly what we've got in our capital improvements plan, whether some of that stuff should be shelved for a while. If we think this project is that important, maybe that's what we should look at doing. And I think those are good points.
Well, on the same issue, I think for a lot of people who've been around town for as long as I have, that's 10 or 11 years for me, and went through this whole process 7 or 8 years ago, it comes down to a question of watching our government follow through with what we entrust it with. It's a trust issue. If town can't, people don't feel they can trust council to follow through with that sales tax, you might find a lot of people wondering, well, why should we trust them in 2000 with all this tax money on?
We've been hearing that, believe me. I don't know if everybody heard Rodney's comments. He was. We should probably try and pass around the microphone. People still have questions. Rodney's comments were essentially that it's a trust issue. He said he's been here 10, 12 years, and he feels like the commitment at the time we passed that sales tax increase was to put that money towards downtown paving and streets and sidewalks. And if we don't do that, then maybe people aren't going to trust us with a $2 million bond issue either. So those are good points. Tom?
What would be your confidence this evening that the business community is going to buy this program this time? Just a question.
I don't know that I have an answer to that question. I will say though, I have been walking the streets in the last week talking to downtown business owners. I haven't gotten out to the GC zone, but it's been pretty 50-50. And actually I would say even probably more like 60-40 in favor in some way, if it can be done in a way that keeps the financial commitment as low as possible. I think people see the value of this kind of opportunity, particularly given, as we've heard from the CDoT folks, that it probably won't happen again. You know, I think one of the questions, maybe it'd be a good time to bring that up. One of the questions was, what was CDOT's take on if this goes away, what's their commitment to the 3-lane? Was that your question? What's their commitment to the 3-lane long term? And maybe you guys could, I mean, we had that discussion a little bit this afternoon. Maybe Kerrie could.
I mean, it was my impression at one time that CDOT was going to do this one or another.
Well, as Ed in his comments at the beginning explained that at one point it was fully funded through the STIP. I don't know, what does STIP stand for?
So STIP is essentially, the simple way to look at it is it's our 6-year design and build plan based on we start with our long range 20-year outlook and then focus down to our 6-year design and build plan, and that's really what our STIP is, which stands for Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. As Ed was mentioning in the presentation, that funding is changing, and a lot of it's driven by the federal highway MAP 21 Act that got passed in 2012, which pretty much says if you're getting federal dollars for highways, it needs to be performance-based, so it needs to be based on number of accidents or the condition of the road. So something like an additional lane, a turn lane in the middle of a town wouldn't get prioritized in the big picture when you're looking at performance data. And there's less discretionary money, which is what we used to work with our counties and plan projects that were of regional importance. That's changing a lot, and that's being driven more by national standards for all states. So the Ridgway plan was identified in the long-range plan as a priority for this area, and we recognize that. We've been trying to get to there with whatever discretion money we have, but right now it's not identified in the future as something that has funding.
But it's your plan when the funding is available.
No, we have no plan to fund it.
I think what you're hearing is that given the national climate, the way the feds are clamping down on giving out money to the states, just the general tightness of funding for discretionary things in general. This 3-lane project, you know, long term, if at all, it's certainly not on anybody's map if we don't do it now.
The only other way it may get funded, and I think this is a long shot, there's a coalition called Impact 64, which is a coalition of all the 64 counties and the metro mayors from Denver that's looking at, is there a statewide opportunity for a sales tax increase of, I think they're looking at 0.7%. I know I'm seeing some shaking of heads, but that there is a coalition that's looking at that and seeing if that's a potential. You know, whether that happens or not. If that did get passed by the voters, that would have to go to the voters and get passed statewide as a voters initiative. This project could get funded through that, but if it's just our standard funding we're getting, we're just going to be fixing our roads and mostly focusing on that.
I don't think we've had a statewide sales tax increase since 1992.
Yes, that's point well taken.
But I think that, you know, obviously the county 0.75 question they had on the November ballot failed pretty widely, and you know, I think there's pretty strong evidence that people aren't interested in increasing our sales tax more than it already is. Rick?
To get back to the previous question about acceptance by the business community or whatever, the reality is a $1.5 million bond is a heck of a lot less than a $2.7 million bond, which is what potentially was a few months ago.
Okay.
And if the town can commit to you know, some of the capital improvements, or a percentage of it, it could reduce the size of the bond even more. I'm just basically reiterating what Andy says.
Okay, so what Rick, so everybody can hear,
difference.
Rick wanted to respond to Tom's question about the openness in general to the building or the business community to this question at this point. His point was a 2 or a 1.5 or even less if we contribute a significant portion of the sales tax is a lot less than the 2.7 we were talking about back in September, October. And you know, I think his point was we should be committing a significant amount of that sales tax, like he said he agreed with Andy, so that we bring that number down as low as we possibly can. And the lower we get it, the more likely the business community can stomach it, I think.
I know it's not a question, but I think what I was saying is a safety issue, why would
Okay, so Torben's question is, and I'm not sure if that was one of the ones. No, it's good. It's a good question. Essentially, why are we considering? Why do we want to make 62 into 3-lane from the current 2-lane? It's something that's been discussed at the town level for probably 15 years, and I think we probably brought it to CDOT in the first place. The idea is, as we all know, the traffic in town, certain times a year, certain times a day, I call it the Telluride train, it can be extremely difficult to get onto, or not necessarily so much get off of, but certainly get onto or across Highway 62 when the traffic is really bad. The worst example probably is the day after Bluegrass when everybody's heading north and the red light stops traffic and the traffic is stopped all the way through town. The concept is with a 3-lane, you would give people an easier way to get out of the traffic flow, not stop up the traffic flow every time somebody has to turn left and there's traffic coming the other way, and make for a more natural pattern of breaks in traffic for people to be able to get across. Was it you that asked? Yeah, you asked about the safety question for kids. Yeah, well, I'm really proud of the fact that we've got 3 new crosswalks in town with this latest sidewalk project that just got completed. And if any of you are familiar with the way Uray does it, as soon as you have 3 lanes in your town, you can put up those signs in the middle of the road that says stop for pedestrians and crosswalk. We've asked for years CDOT to allow us to do that. We can't do that until we have the extra space of the 3-lane in order to do that. Is that still the case, Ed?
I believe so.
So we would actually, I think the 3-lane would make for safer pedestrian crossings, particularly in line with the new crosswalks that we have. Does that answer your question? So I know there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of debate about whether 3-lane is really good. I think one of the questions was about parking. Actually, through our project, our original downtown infrastructure project, there is some limited parking that's lost because you can't park on 62 anymore. But actually, there's increased parking through delineation and the new paving and curb and gutter that actually, I think, Brownie, you know, that I think there was a net increase of maybe 5 or 10 spaces, even with the loss of, and when you look at it, the loss of parking on 62 is really in 2 blocks. The parking next to the park would stay because that is actually town right away. It's town property, it's not right away. Those spaces that are next to the sidewalk on the south side of the park. But the parking along the block by Unicas and the Chinese restaurant and Riggs, and then in front of the liquor store across the street, the old liquor store, the antique store in the next block, those parking spaces would go away. When I was talking to Frowny earlier today, he pointed out that in the town of Telluride, when they put in what they call that boardwalk in front of like the Steaming Bean, where there is no street side parking there's just a really wide sidewalk, those businesses found that they actually had better business because their businesses were more visible, there's a nice place to sit out front, it actually improved things for them. So, you know, I think there's 2 sides to every question, and really the loss of the parking from the widening of 62 can be offset by the improved parking through the paved and curbed and gutter part of downtown. Rodney, you're looking puzzled.
Well, no, I just think parking on 62 is a really serious safety hazard because it reduces visibility.
Okay, so Rodney's point is that another advantage to actually getting rid of the parking on 62 is that it creates safety issues with people being able to see coming off of the side street. So I've heard that from numerous people. Kip?
John, do you have any details? You have talked about the parking, like, you have any specific details for each street? Is it going to be diagonal? Any of that detail right there?
It's in the plan. We could get into it. Well, one of the things that came out of our last year plus committee that looked long and hard at the streetscape plan and looked for ways we could improve it. The original plan had, I'm trying to remember, on Clinton Street, it had diagonal parking.
Both sides were parallel.
Both sides were parallel. So what we did is we narrowed the sidewalk on the north side in front of Kate's and the Fike building where Billings Artworks is. Narrowed that sidewalk because the feedback was that the people there didn't want a whole lot of additional sidewalk there. So we could keep the diagonal parking on one side and do parallel on the other. Pretty much everywhere else the way you see it, where there's diagonal now, there will be diagonal. I think the main difference is Cora. Cora is a mess with the combination of parallel and straight in, and people park every which way along Cora, and that'll all get improved.
So the plan is actually on the town website, the 2008 streetscape plan. So you can pull that up. There are some changes to that that the outreach committee and the public came up with over this last year that are we can somehow append in there. So it's not totally accurate today, but it's pretty close, and you'll get an idea from the plan.
I mean, if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
if I remember right, when we originally did this, there was an actual net gain parking overall. Is there not?
That's what I was just saying, yeah.
Yeah.
There was, I think, though, there were the
Sorry.
2 parking lots north of the library as part of that, but then I think just delineating the parking downtown and organizing it and structuring it with some hard service, and then really the loss of parking along Highway 62, and then creating more on-street parking. But we would need to have an off-street parking lot, which is not part of this plan, outside of the Railroad Street parking lot where it gets realigned to Highway 62.
Okay, Ed asked me, and I think it's a very reasonable question, if we could deal with the CDOT specific questions, get them, they've got to get back to Durango tonight, they'd like to get on the road. So let's try and deal with, or you're trying to get back to Durango too, okay, so let's try and deal with the engineering questions.
I'd like to answer one question for this gentleman about what happens if we don't get funded. I think the plan, because there's such an emphasis from the town and from the Gunnison Valley TPR, Spark Priority, it would stay in the plan, but there's no guarantee for funding. We have a lot of projects in the plan that aren't funded. So this is planned funding. It would just stay on the books and sit there until there was a tax incentive, a tax initiative, or another some additional funding that came along. So that's the real answer to the question. So if we can answer some of these engineering questions.
Yeah, I'd say the next big one is the drainage questions. There were a couple of questions about, Tate asked if it will stay surface. I don't believe it will. And then maybe Joanne.
Well, I think I'll have to defer to Joanne somewhat, but I think the surface drain, the storm drain is going to be a combination of surface and underground. And I believe the break, I'm guessing, will probably be about the park, that we would take it to the river. And a big answer to some of these questions is it's too early to tell. Like Mr. Clark said, we don't have our plans put together. The town's well ahead of us as far as for the enhancement portion or for the town section. All we have as far as CDOT is design is we have the bridge designed to meet the profile and built. We have that cross section agreed to with the town, and we have some preliminary survey, our topographic survey, and some utility locations marked. We don't have all our utilities located. So as far as the drainage to the north, I'll let Joanne speak to that.
Can you come up and use the mic, please? Or I'll bring you the mic if you want.
No, it's okay.
But the other drainage to be determined. We have a lot of work to do. We have not designed this yet.
Makes
so
it easier
you
for
can just
everybody.
talk about drainage to the north.
What I've got in the budget for drainage to the north is where it crosses the highway and comes down Mary, and where it crosses the highway and comes down Cora, it would be in pipe until it got to the big ditch on Mary, and on Cora it would be in pipe until it got to Charles Street, and then there's already a pretty big drainage there that goes into pipe when you get to Otto.
But to reemphasize, we still need to do a lot of hydraulic analysis and design on that. So we're at beginning stages for this project. To answer the 2017 question, the funds have to be spent, the project has to be done by the end of calendar year 2017. Will it take us that long to get there? It could. Like Mr. Clark said, we've just started. We haven't even started design much. So we were talking today, and I think I'm hoping that we could have this advertised so we could start construction in 2016. If we could start construction in 2016, that would allow us 2 seasons of work to get this project done. So we have 2 seasons in our pocket to figure out how to get the project done, essentially. I think that would be a good goal for the designer, for us to manage towards, since there's so many unknowns. Why 2 years? Phasing, storm drain, utility relocations, everything that I talked about earlier that are unknowns, we need to get it figured out. So if we have 2 years to figure it out and how to get it done, it's a heck of a lot more comfortable than knowing we only have to get everything done in 1 year.
So how about that question about, there was a detailed question about phasing. If a street got completely closed, how long would it be closed, for instance?
I can't answer that. We don't, back to my original statement, we're too early to give you any details on where detours go or how long roads are going to be closed.
The discussions we've had, though, I would just throw out that, you know, one of my biggest concerns, I think I already said, is the impact of the actual construction project on town. It's going to be huge. It's going to be painful. We know just from what the bridge project was that it can be potentially very difficult and challenging and painful. We've talked about how getting with the business community when it comes to actually working with the contractor who gets the bid and sitting down and figuring out with the existing business owners what would work best for phasing for them in a way that is manageable, doesn't drive up costs too much. Try and do it in winter. Well, that's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah, the challenge for the winter is we have an eagle habitat restrictions from November 15th to March 15th, so that's pretty much a no-go in this location for winter construction. And to Mr. Clark's point, we're finishing a project in Monte Vista this year. We had some constraints that we gave to the contractor during the bid phase, during the advertisement phase. Contractor came on board, looked at the project, gave us another proposal, talked to the business owners and to the town, and quite honestly, they did a really good job of minimizing impacts more than what we anticipated. And I think that's where there's a partnership between the town and CDOT and the contractor can be very beneficial if, as long as that contract's written correctly and lets the contractor be creative. We've been pretty successful in a lot of instances of minimizing impacts and getting construction done a lot faster. Contractors don't want to sit around and take a long time to get their job done. It costs them money. They make a lot more money the faster they get out of town.
And the goal certainly would be to try and keep one lane open wherever possible throughout the whole project. But of course, the details, devil's in the details. We'd have to get to the actual point where we were negotiating with a contractor to try and figure that out.
So can I just clarify, you're talking about a possible 2-year planning period and then a 2-season construction time, right? Not construction for the next 4 years.
Correct.
I just wanted to make
There's
sure.
no way we need at least 2 years to probably design this job. Typically, rule of thumb, it takes us 2 years to do a project this size, to get it designed, to get it surveyed, get preliminary design done, to acquire any right-of-way. We're not planning on buying any right-of-way. We might need temporary easements to get on someone's property while we're doing handicap ramps. So another issue I need. So all the sidewalks will be ADA compliant. We'll have to have handicap ramps the whole length. So with that, we'll stay within our right-of-way, but you know, if we're gonna be working outside that, we need to get temporary easement. So yes, it'll take 2 years to design this job.
If I could just add something, I've gone through this in 2 different communities, Telluride and Durango both, where we did Main Street sidewalks, pretty extensive renovation. Telluride, we closed every business one day, that was it. We worked closely with the community to do bypasses, to keep signs out for people to have, so that people knew their businesses were open. I think we can do the same things here. It might be a little more than a day because it's a little more of an impact, but I think you can do really creative things with limiting the impacts on businesses. Durango's doing the same thing. Their goal is 1 day too, the same way we did in Telluride. So.
Question about the pedestrian crossings. We talked about this, right, Joanne, down by off of Lena. And some benefit to a 3-lane is it gives pedestrians refuge when they are crossing the street. So that was talked about in the streetscapes plan, I believe. So we have to look at pedestrian crossings. I can't answer that whether or not we put pedestrian signals in. Like I said, it's a little too early, but I think it's honestly it's a good idea.
How about this question number 20? What is the reason CDOT likes this project?
I'm going to give it up to Jen because she's the one that did the application, and it is the town's application. There was earlier question or statement from Mr. Clark about enhancement projects. The town of Ridgway has done the best job in Region 5 as far as applying for and being successful in completing enhancement projects, and the credit goes to the town, to the staff. They've done a great job. Quite honestly, that's a segue to hand this to Jen because she's the one that saw it, her and Joanne, and they saw the opportunity to use RAMP funding to get this project done. So it's the same mindset that they've been using in the past. Other locales within the region, they're not as successful, quite honestly. Ridgway has a reputation for acquiring enhancement funds.
Well, Kerrie, maybe you could take a stab at that because I'm going to protect Jen from having to toot her own horn. I mean, you gave the example of that the committee actually voted to put in a special stipulation for us to be able to have our bond question qualify for this funding. So I'm curious, do you have a sense of the entities that reviewed our application and made the recommendation to the funding, the actual people who made the funding decision, how that worked and why we were given sort of special dispensation?
Well, and I think the answer to that question is, it's been identified as a priority in this area for a long time. It's been the TPR, which is the planning region of all the counties in this part of the state, has identified that as a priority. And that was one of the factors. It's been recognized in our region as being a priority. It's been in the long-range plan for a long time. And part of it has to do with some geographic equity too. As far as the ramp projects, there was a recognition from the commission that they couldn't all be in Denver. There was some large aggressive applications in Denver. So there was recognition that this needed to be a statewide program. This had been identified in the long-range plan and in this area as a priority for a long time. So I think that played into it as well as the town staff.
Town staff doing a good job on the
Now
application.
you have to say that.
No, I'm not having to say that. No.
Jen, do you want
It
to
is true. It is
respond?
true.
I'll just say a couple of things, and it really is Joanne Fagan. It has nothing to do with me. Joanne really makes these projects happen. She knows how to navigate CDOT and work with the CDOT staff and to get things done efficiently and effectively. So that's the short answer to that. But I think also, and we discussed with council this summer, that some of the pros and cons and the challenges and opportunities with the project, recognizing a lot of things, and the community's coming from a lot of different places on what they want to see and how much they want to pay for it. And so I think all of the council and staff are just trying to bring resources to the table for the community to absorb and consider, and really think long and hard about what we want our community to look like in the future, how we want that to happen. And now here's an opportunity in front of us. Will we have our challenges? Absolutely, and we've identified some of those here tonight. There's going to be challenges with any project of this size and this type. That includes funding, financing, where that comes from, and how as a community we get together and talk about it and what's palatable. And I think the comments here tonight have been really helpful. They've been very good. I don't think there's anything surprising. It's what we've heard a lot of over the course of the last year, and there's huge value in this conversation. So when we sat down and looked at, CDOT, as Rod mentioned earlier, are you going to do the project and just have a CDOT project? Well, if CDOT does have a project and they want to do it, and I think we heard tonight, yeah, it's on the plan, but it's not funded, the town really doesn't get a seat at the table. We have an amazing group here tonight out of Durango, both Kerrie and Ed and the team they work with down there, and we're very, very fortunate that they're sensitive to local impacts and listening to local communities. And we've been able to make that relationship and make that happen. And so huge kudos to these guys. Their system is not easy to navigate. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely challenging. And it has its own problems. And we don't always get along either, but tonight we do. So no, but I think, so we look, and drainage has been a big conversation here tonight. So if CDOT does a project and then the town has to come in and do a project, how do we integrate that and how do we get the grades right, as Ed mentioned, and where does that water go, and what are those different costs that we're absorbing that we don't need to absorb when we can work together on a collaborative project. And so that's really all we're here tonight to share, is that this is an opportunity, it's a collaborative project, we're willing to bring it to the table and work together, and providing some additional detail to the community that has been provided to the council and discussed with CDOT to say, okay, where and how do we go from here and what does that look like? And so hopefully everybody feels like they're getting good information tonight, and we'll supplement that and continue to have the conversation as we move forward. But
Use the feedback forms to give us further feedback.
Sorry.
No,
I have
fine.
to address the lady with the blue hat. So she had the question, what happens if we go over budget?
I was going to ask that.
Okay, so that,
the cost overrun question.
We can't go cost overrun. If we do, we have to go back to the commission. The commission's approved $10.5 million for this project. If we go over that, if we get the town's enhancement portion and CDOT 62 portion, and we put them together, and it totals more than the planned amount, we have to go to the commission and say, all right, Mr. Commission, we need some more money. And at that point, they could say, thumbs up or thumbs down, you don't get it. And so we talked earlier, and it's our responsibility, the team's responsibility, to keep the scope constrained, and therefore the budget's constrained. And back to those risk items. Utilities, phasing, cost overruns for just quantities and different types of items. I mean, it can add up. So the bottom line is we have to work together to keep this within the requested amount. And I don't want to go ask for money with it when this is our largest project.
That said, we do feel like this is a realistic budget, that the budget that particularly the town put together, because there's a lot more already detailed work done, in combination with you guys' sense of what your scope is. I know we've had this discussion. You feel like it's definitely within the realm with some percentage.
I'm not going to say definitely. I'm not
Okay.
But to give you a number, when we were looking at this project in 2005, 2006, we had an estimate of $10.5 million. And I believe that's what we had in the STIP in 16 and 17. But that was a much more extensive storm drain system. And now working with the town, we can cut that back. So I think overall you look at it, it looks okay.
Just one other point to make on top of that, as part of the letter from the town on January 6th, there is a commitment to the cost schedule and budget. So, you know, all that Ed's working on, and we're going to work closely with the town and make sure everybody's on board with the schedule, cost, and scope.
Okay, great. Paula?
I want to point out some other good news that I think for the business owners that no one's mentioned is when I was talking to business owners about streetscapes, one of the concerns was that, you know, they're still feeling the recession. If they could just wait a year or two before they had to face the increased taxes. And if you're not beginning till 2016 and 17, we're not going to see that tax increase until 2017, 2018, or even beyond before we see the full impact of that. So it gives some breathing room to the businesses here.
We would probably exercise the bonds in 2015.
Oh, you would?
We would, yeah. It won't be
In
2014.
in 2015.
Oh, thank you for
So,
clarifying.
and you know, those are some of the details that have to be worked out, but we probably would have to exercise them sooner to get some of the money in the pipeline for getting.
The whole bond, the whole amount?
Well, when we go for the bond, we got to go for the bond. But what the whole amount is the big question. Is it 2? Is it 1.5? Is it 1.1? So yeah.
Okay.
So just to reiterate, please take one of the feedback forms. Maybe we can get one of those on the website too, so you can give us feedback later if you want. I feel terrible. I meant at the very beginning of this meeting to express the town and I'm sure the community's concern about the mine accident that happened yesterday, and I just want to send out my personal and the town of Ridgway's concern and love and just real heartfelt feelings for everyone that went through that accident yesterday and is still obviously going to be feeling the impacts of it for a while. I know we all agree with that, so sorry I didn't mention that sooner. Any closing comments? Thank you all for coming. It's really heartening to see this kind of active input and respectful, and thank you for giving us your thoughts.